mai, haere mai, ke Aoteroa Rugby Pod. Welcome to the Aoteroa Rugby Pod once again as the All Blacks bounce back hopefully against Italy after a close loss to France where in a lot of ways they were their own worst enemy. Lots of opportunities created, plenty of opportunities squandered. What else do we see? England and Wales. Geez, they're asking some questions of themselves now. The Wallabies keep on building. South Africa ploughs on as South Africa ploughs on. And we look forward maybe to next week's show as well. We're going to have an awards show next week. We'll talk a little bit later about how you can contribute towards that, as well as your emails, your YouTube comments that you've sent through to Aoteroa Rugby Pod at sky.co.nz for the chance to win the Players Sports Gilbert Ball. Joining me, as always, in studio, James Parsons. Fired up after a weekend of international
Fired
footy.
up, or maybe just a little bit flat after the tight loss. But yeah, as you said, like plenty of opportunities created, just couldn't capitalise on it.
Yeah, and Bryn Hall joining us from Japan. Brynner, after watching that game, what were you thinking?
Oh, I think pretty similar to what Jipper was saying, and actually probably a lot of the pundits back home. A lot of opportunities. I think if you're looking at the stats, especially on the attacking side, we had multiple opportunities to win that. So probably another one that I probably think that us as Kiwis and probably Jipper, myself and you, Ross, will be thinking that it's another one that got away that we probably could have won. So we'll dive a bit deeper, but yeah, a little bit somber waking up in Japan and the results. So yeah.
Brynner, you like to talk about visits to the 22 and coming away with something. 11 visits, lots of rucks down their end of the field from the All Blacks and just 2 tries. Why do you think they couldn't quite nail those little things?
Well, it's been a theme probably throughout the year. I think Razor, a lot of that coaching group and even players have talked around execution and probably having multiple opportunities, but just haven't been able to execute in high pressure moments. And, you know, we probably saw that on the weekend. Look, they did score points. They did score 9 points in that last quarter. And, you know, that is coming away with some form of points that they were able to, I guess, build that scoreboard pressure through their attacking ability. Because there was a lot of good stuff around their attack, but just at opportune times, like I look at the one where a passage of play where, you know, it was a multi-phase, high minutes with ball and play, and then the French end up scoring from that. But if you look at that, the amount of times that we were attacking and actually the opportunities that were coming from that, it was kind of like a 14-point swing, which I thought Will Jordan probably could have gone through and scored that try with the offload from Tupou Vai, but conversely, the French end up scoring off that. So just little things at the moment. It's small margin of areas. Razor has talked about that a lot, and unfortunately, we're just not getting on that side of the coin at the moment. But they're happy. The pleasing thing, I know we're optimistic in this group. They are making multiple opportunities. Look, if you look at the stats, 31 defender beaters to 11 to the French, 9 clean breaks, 4 for the French, and 16 offloads to 6. And this is against a French team who have a lot of flair and actually are very good in around their offload game. So I know we're optimistic, but I feel it's another one that got away from us, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think they'll be frustrated because probably the first game since the second South African test where we spoke about the same sort of thing, like a lot of opportunities created, but we just didn't get the reward. And I agree with Brynner, we did get the reward through threes, and that has been a change of tact in their strategy around the points from what we saw at the start of the year. Could they have been a little bit more ambitious? I don't think focusing on that last penalty, whether to go to the 3 is where it was potentially lost. I think that first half probably created enough opportunities to maybe get close to 28, 30 points. And then that pressure of, you know, if they did get that one try from the mistake, it's not as massive. But because the French went bang, bang, and you saw we had a little bit of a slow start in all second halves on this tour, even, you know, in Japan, and although we've been fixated on that last 20, the last 20 has actually been quite clinical, but now we've just seen a little bit of even against England, that first 20 or that third quarter has sort of cost us and made these games a lot tighter than they probably need to be.
I think if you do look back, and I don't have this as like scientific evidence, but if you look back through the autumn internationals, the teams that have relied on goal kicks through the last quarter have not been the teams that have won. In the end, the teams that are scoring more tries are the teams that are winning. And I just wonder why there has been this conservative approach when the last few years, I know we spoke about it in the last couple of weeks, but it's still right there. Going to the corner and putting some pressure on, keeping that field position, scoring that try. You know, maybe if you've been down there and you've only, you know, managed to do it in 2 out of 11 attempts, you lose your confidence. But
Yeah, it's a hard one. Like we sort of had the discussion at the time with the crew I was watching it with, and I did feel that they were in that last 20 actually getting out of their half and working their way up and forcing the French into penalties. So the idea of getting it within 3, I don't know, like I just don't think that was the biggest area of where we could have won that game. And we won't get into the neck roll because, in the end they win by 1 point, but that was not a penalty in my opinion with Tonga Fussy. So you look at that first half and the opportunities that we didn't quite turn into that 7 points is where we didn't get the scoreboard pressure we probably had earned, and really sort of made the French go into that half a little bit more shaken than they did, because at 17-10 I think that they would have been really happy going into the break like that.
Some of those calls were a lottery, I'm just going to say it. Some of those calls, I don't think the ref is up to it. But I wonder if you can explain why you don't think that was a neck roll.
Because it sort of went past, and then, like there's no actual, like you've got to see, I think, was it in the Irish game or the English game, you can see like the neck actually gets wrenched, whereas you can see there's not head contact, and he sort of goes past him and then more towards that underarm, but then there's not that, that what they're saying, the croc roll, like really just like viciously.
Weight on the leg.
Yeah,
well.
and the way you used to get trained is you control the neck, you control the head, you control the body. So there's none of that sort of action. So I just don't see how that could have been a penalty. And what I don't understand is, so often you see these TMO calls, and then part of the process is the main referee will look on the big screen and we've seen it overturned by the main referee to say, no, I don't agree with that, but he went just straight to, okay, it's a penalty. Like he sort of skipped that step, and I know some people will like that because it sped the game up, but I just think it was a big call that they got wrong.
You just got to try adapt on the run, and that's probably what the All Blacks would have touched on and talked about. But look, I think as fans, it was pretty frustrating, not only for, I guess, the All Black fans, but for the French as well. You'd have to think that there were some calls that they were thinking that we're on the same page with what we were thinking. So, yeah, hopefully we can have a wee little chat around a better ref next time.
You know how we always say when you're a captain or players, you look at the trends of refs?
Yeah.
I think his trend would look a lot different to the bulk of the other refs and what they look for, and especially the rules that have been brought in over the Autumn International, he seemed fixated with and really wanted to sort of nail that down. So we just probably missed a lot of opportunities just of that slight inaccuracy around the breakdown both sides of the ball.
There was one there where Ratime was trying to hook the ball back with his foot, and he got given the 1 second call, and then he got given the 2 second call, and then blown up and they lost the ball. I found that kind of interesting because I wonder why, if you've got a caterpillar with 2 men long, why is it on the halfback to go to the front to hook it back himself? Surely one of those guys within the caterpillar maul can hook that back to make Ratima's life easy instead of having to tiptoe around the edges, which he did multiple times.
You can see the teams do it very well. Even the guys that have set up the caterpillar, they're using their inside leg to be able to get that ball to come back, or if they see the halfback struggling, it's a hand or it's been able to get their foot to be able to bring it back. Because look, I think now it's so hard with the officiating of how it's done. You saw that Cortez pretty much every single time, and not only him, but a lot of halfbacks, even myself playing in Japan right now, how difficult it is if you can't get that right. That ability to get that box kick game is really hard. And if you do get it right, especially with these new laws around the escort strip, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's made it a lot more harder to try and escort. So it becomes not even a 50-50. It's pretty much like you're going to be able to have a contestable chance to get the ball, because that escort is pretty much not happening anymore with the new rule change. So yeah, I think the work on with that, Ross, like you touched on with Cortez, is the forwards have to be able to try and get that ball back, or even the ball presentation as well has to be able to be put back in a position where you can get a long reach for them to be able to get that ball to go back easier, because it was a little bit too tough for Cortez on the weekend, unfortunately.
You almost need to set up a bailout though, don't you reckon, Bryn? Like, because just the coming to the 5 seconds isn't really an option. And if there is that conversion of who's bringing it back, there must be a way that you can sort of pop the ball up and set another breakdown somewhere else.
A couple of solutions that we've had in previous teams that I've had, that you always have that bailout. So whether it be a 10 or a 15 that's going to go for a long kick, they're pretty much always ready. If there is a bailout, then they can go to that contestable side. Now, it is a little bit difficult if it's going to the side that the 9's going to kick, because he is a bit flatter and he has to go back to then be able to go for the catch for the contestable. But on the open side, it is a lot easier to go for that contestable. So there is preparation in terms of if it doesn't work out with that 5 seconds, you've got to bail out, like you said, with that contestable kick on the far side, or you can pretty much just torpedo it and kick it right down the middle of the field, or at least 40, 50 metres, and you take the referee out of it, because it actually is a big play. If you've got a dominant scrum as well and it's a turnover, it's really difficult to put you massive amount of pressure from the get-go.
Yeah, I just think it could become a weapon, because you look at defences, you know, like they're so fixated on the caterpillar that all their attention's in there, that actually making it look like that and then having even an attack to kick from the edge or go to an open side in that contestable with the new escort laws, I don't know, it seems a much better play than just letting the time roll out. Like being a little bit more patient, a little bit more urgent when it gets that 2-3 seconds, because like it's just such an easy turnover, such a frustrating turnover.
It gets called pretty early, so if there's a ruck on the sideline, you know that pass is going to go to that pot of 3, and then you know that pretty much game management wise that it's going to be going to a contestable kick. So I think it's more so the process of being able to get the ball carrier and the 3 guys. They have a really important job to be able to win the contact first and then set that caterpillar, and then there's usually one guy on the open side that ends up hearing that call from the 9 or the 10 that's in behind, saying, I don't know, rum, for example, rum on the run. So they end up making sure that their movements are really, really fast, because if they're laboured and they're just, they're going very slow, then it just takes up that time. So the really good teams, it's a full process and they know exactly what they're doing. And I think that's the most important thing. When you get that core of a contestable kickoff 9, you know straight away that your movements are fast, and then you take out that kind of 5 seconds from that.
You force that knock on and you end up at a set piece where the All Blacks, that scrum is looking really good.
But we're focused on, the best sides in world rugby at the moment is so set piece dominant, and to look at the growth in that area, both line out and scrum, there is a clear strength building for the All Blacks, and depth. We're forgetting that Ethan de Groot hasn't had a crack. Like, he was our number 1 loose head. To see the development and growth in big games for Tamaiti Williams is so exciting. We know the asset and the skill set he has around the park, defensively and attacking wise, but to see the dominance he's having at set piece, both lifting and scrummaging, it's pretty awesome. It's to the point that you'll look at the end of the year and think he's probably one of the biggest movers in terms of where he sits in the team now. Hard to drop him.
Yeah.
Like, and Ireland and France are no mugs at set piece, so it's been massive, and I think it's also been massive for Asafa Aumua as well.
And his athleticism, I think he had 9 carries on the weekend. So he's getting through a lot of work. Massive
amounts of work, and it's also, I suppose, like, not many people see that, but you watch the work he does in the kick chase line. He's very, I suppose, methodical in what energy he does use. He's always goes that sort of halfway house and not overworking. So he's got the balances of his game right to know that when he's involved, he can be at that full energetic, power athlete state that he's just showing, and then some at the moment.
So Brim, we've got all of these pieces in place. You've got a dominant set piece. You've got a line out that's attacking the opposition and winning multiple balls. You've got holes being made. You've got people going through them. They're getting to the right end of the field, spending more time at the right end of the field than the opposition, but it's just not quite going to plan. So we've got a question here from Dirk Bagent, and he says, the All Blacks were always attributed with great ball handling skills under big pressure, and that came from them learning ball handling at a young age at the grassroots. But time and time again, the All Blacks are making unforced errors under pressure. Has something changed in the way the game is taught at grassroots level that's leading to this?
I don't think so at the grassroots. I don't think it's changed a lot. I think we still have that flair and ability to be able to use our skill set, and especially when you're younger, like Drip, when I, and even yourself, Ross, probably when you're younger, you'd be throwing around a footy ball and being able to do it, whether it was at school or just with your mates, or even at club rugby when you're growing up. So I don't think you lose that at the grassroots. I just think if you're looking specifically at the All Blacks, they're making multiple opportunities, but it's the execution that's probably leaving them down in the attacking system, whether it's through a breakdown error or it's ill-discipline and around that, or it's a last offload. Like you look on the weekend, Big Times went through a couple of times and had Roy out on the inside, doesn't find that person, makes it in the second half, makes a big line break, then there's a little knock on, it's a steal, I believe, from that. So again, we've made these multiple opportunities, and the coaching group has been setting about that, but it's the execution thing that we haven't been able to nail this year. So I think if our reviewers, we've still got two. We've got another game, but I think if that's one thing we're going to look at this All Black squad is that the execution side is one thing they're going to have to try and marry up in. I don't know how they're going to be able to do that because they've talked about it a lot pretty much throughout the year, whether that's just through time in the saddle. We've talked around decluttering with some other teams, when being able to make a lot of mistakes. Are you clear in terms of what you're doing? I probably think that they are. They're probably evolved and they know what their game that they are doing. It's probably just maybe under fatigue because if you look on the weekend, we had a lot of ball. We only had, what was our kicking rate? I think we only had like 16 kicks, where the week before we had 31 kicks. So we played a lot of footy. And so when you're under pressure, you're playing a high octane attacking rugby, your decision making and your skill set under pressure when you're under fatigue is really hard. So that might be something that they go away with and being able to work under pressure, under fatigue, and doing those skills at training and trying to replicate that as much as they can to try and get a better outcome.
So we've had a few emails come through, and please send your emails through to Aoteroa Rugby Pod at sky.co.nz. That last one was from Austria. This one comes from an American who lives in New Zealand, Paul Kravonas. And just carrying on with the propping theme about how well Tamaiti Williams and Ofa Tuangafasi are currently going. He says he played rugby for almost 60 years ago while he was at varsity in California, and he's now living in New Zealand, and he has a rather odd scrum question, so this is for you. Given that Tamaiti Williams and Ofa Tuangafasi can each play on either side of the scrum, would there be any value when they are on the field at the same time to occasionally have them switch sides to confuse the opposition?
Not in my opinion, because I think scrummaging's about the 8 and timing and connection. And yes, they can play both sides, but they are stronger in their main sort of position. And it's not just what they could potentially do, it's also about the locks and the flankers and what disruption that would cause. So I just believe you'll dictate your scrum by how you guys are connected and how you transfer that weight. And if you start fiddling with that needlessly, then I think you're just putting yourself at risk to make a mistake, because don't forget the pitcher then changes to the ref. Whenever there's subs or changes come on, refs will focus on the new subs, and normally there's free kicks or penalties until they adjust. So less is best from this risk-adverse scrummager.
Don't roll the dice.
I just don't think there's a need to. If you're that dominant, if you're struggling, absolutely. But if things are going well, I think if you're struggling, then potentially it's something you can do to try and change the picture on the opposition, but also the referee, and try and win that ref back. But in the current state of affairs, it's humming.
It's going pretty well.
So let's not move too many people around that may lead to a penalty, because it's quite a lot different.
Yeah.
And gone of the days of, I suppose, seeing a Ben Franks play both sides because we've gone to that extended bench. There's no real need for it unless there's injury.
Yeah, and as a hooker, you like the feel of home, the appropriate body on each side.
I'm a big fan of consistent preparation leads to consistent performance, so less messing with me, the better.
It just flows off his tongue, doesn't it? So, like he said that before, consistently.
I really, really like a consistent prep.
Well, there you go. The consistent answer for you, Paul, and we'll send you out the Players Sports Gilbert Ball. And if you're in New Zealand and you want to get along to playersports.co.nz and support ARP as well, they're offering you a 20% discount at their online store. Go to the QR code when you get to the checkout. Put in the code RugbyPod20 and you get 20% off All Black Supporters Kit, boots and balls if you head along to Players Sports. And please send us more of your emails. Aoteroa Rugby Pod at sky.co.nz. We'll have another ball to give away next week for the best question. And of course, please send us some stuff with some ideas for what the awards could be. Any idea awards that you want us to get into next week, send that along and we might get you a Eden Park Paris kit out to you as well. So, look, plenty to talk about from that game. Not the only game to talk about from the weekend. Ireland versus Argentina. Argentina have been good this year. There was always a chance that they were going to go there and almost cause an upset. And wow, Brenner.
That first 5 minutes was pretty much, not even the first five minutes actually, probably there was a try disallowed straight after it as well. It could have been 21-0, but it was the Ireland that we've been accustomed to seeing. They played on very quick ball. Jamison Gibson-Park was getting that ball out, lightning quick ball. They had great animation in and around their backs. They were able to score on the edge with bridge passes from Jamo, or even with Crowley to the line for the first try. It was the Ireland team that we've probably seen with Johnny Sexton and the way that they used to play. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen with Ireland this year is just been their discipline. their discipline this year has really cost them in terms of being able to give teams opportunities to come back into the game through scoreboard pressure. You look at that on the weekend with Argentina, 9 points, even just through ill discipline, 13 penalties after 70 minutes to Argentina's 5. Argentina's discipline has been a big issue with them over the last few years, but they nailed their right. And when it seems when they get that low ill discipline numbers, they perform very, very well because they can attack, and like we saw on the weekend, they made it very, very close. So I think for Ireland, they've shown bits and pieces of the way that we're used to seeing them with Johnny Sexton, with what I saw in the first probably 20 minutes. But ill discipline has been one thing that I've touched on with Ireland. But Argentina, again, very, very close. Even on their day, even that last 2 minutes, they could have snatched a draw with a drop kick or even a penalty, or even scoring at the end. So a great test match, and definitely a game of two halves.
Yeah, I think we spoke about we'd learn a lot about Argentina from this game. Could they, keep that performance? Could they really be in the contest? And, I suppose at half-time you sort of felt Ireland could pull away, but as Bryn mentioned, their discipline just allowed Argentina so many opportunities. I think they'll look back on a year where they'll be disappointed in their little lapses, their little 5-minute blocks where they give a yellow card away, or, they sort of go too aggressively at the breakdown and give away a penalty. I think they could have been a lot more successful than they have. I think they've had a great year, Argentina, but there's probably 2 or 3 games there they'll feel they've sort of left out there, which for them in the way they build towards a World Cup cycle, probably not a bad thing. Like they're not knocking on the door, but if they can turn around those little moments where they just let themselves down, and normally it's such a big thing, like it is a red card, yellow card, or intercept try, or whatever it may be, but it's just those little moments, if they can clean that up, they'll be much better. Ireland, look, they looked strong, especially early. I think they will be disappointed that against the All Blacks and against RG, they just gave too many opportunities, too many easy points, and it went down to the wire, but they got away with the win.
There's a lot at stake there. Speaking about a lot at stake, Bryn, England, Steve Borthwick, 5 losses in a row. They headed into this autumn series. I think fans probably expected them to win most of their games. They weren't bad in New Zealand earlier in the year. They seem to be leading towards something. And while Marcus Smith looks $1 million, and they're close, they're not there.
They're kind of the what if at the moment, I think, England, because they do so many good things, but when push comes to shove in tight situations, they just don't get it done. Like, for example, if you look at you look at our series, very tight games and tight situations, but we're able to get the job done. But then I look on the weekend, and for the amount of good stuff that they did do, opportunist tries happened with South Africa. Like the times that they needed to be clinical and they were given opportunities, they scored tries. You look at Grant Williams' first try, his ability to be able to beat one-on-one tackle, not really anything structural. It's just some great ability by Grant Williams. And then you look at Detroit's try, 2 charges up from Eben Etzebeth, so they're not really working that hard for that try. Then you look at Colby's second try with Allende, just a one-on-one miss, actually not a one-on-one, a 2v1, and he gets through and they end up scoring a try. So how clinical South Africa are, it's probably not the same when it comes to England. The last 20 minutes, they had 6 entries in the 22 with no points. And they had a lot of opportunities to try and score points. So whether that was through a pick and go with Slade, a line out, a double miss in the line out, a knock on from Randall, bad ball placement, a stopping of a maul, and all those kind of situations and tight situations, they're just not getting that right. So I wouldn't say they're similar to us, but they are having opportunities to be able to try and win games. It's just been execution, especially on the weekend against the South Africans, where if you look on the other side, they didn't play that very well for all of that game, the South Africans, but with this team at the moment and the rich reign of form that they're in, they're able to win games. They know how to win games. They find a way to win games. And when they're given opportunities to try and score points with the guys that I touched on with scoring tries, they're able to win games like that.
This is going to sound ridiculous, this comment, but I almost feel like they look the best, in my opinion, of England I've seen in a long time. Like, I just think they need to get that confidence to play more and absolutely utilise this talent of Marcus Smith's and take a few risks. And it's not just taking a few risks, kicking to the corner, like 6 entries, let's make one count.
Yeah.
Like we've got to get across the line. We've spoken about the All Blacks. You just have to make hay while the sun shines. And to do that with the defensive pressure, you do have to take risks. People will say, well, what about Va'i's pass? Maybe not that far out. But in the 22, I do think you've either got to go to the bully game and back yourself to go eventually get over them, or you have to chance your arm that we've seen, not to lean on South Africa, but those little crossfield kicks or, a little bit of a fixed play like we've seen with Ireland with a lot of bodies in motion, but somehow find a way to get across that line, because they actually are playing well enough to compete with the best sides in the world.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel they're I suppose, I don't want to say conservative, because Marcus Smith isn't conservative, but maybe the licence he has, he almost comes to life when they're in trouble. Can we get that when they're on even footing? And I think they can be a force. And in this next cycle, he looks like he's just come of age. I don't know what it is, if it's he's getting better ball but just he is looking so mature and so in control. Yeah, and I know there's been some coaching change since the New Zealand tour, but if they could take that defence and how accurate they were with that energy and intensity they had here in June with this autumn series attack, because they've leaked a lot of points.
Yeah.
And I know they've had a lot of coaching changes around defence and systems, and rush D can be dangerous, but they have leaked a hell of a lot of points. So that defensive effort we saw down here, if they can marry that up with this exciting attacking, it'll be a tough thing to wear down.
Yeah. In saying that, how do you tackle Cheslin Colby?
Well, I actually want to make a case, and I've said it all year, Allende needs to get a vote for World Player of the Year or something. Like, the guy is so consistent. Like, to actually go through Ben Earl, I think it was, and Slade, like two very good defenders, and keep his lead. Like, if you're a kid, that's what you want. He's dropped his body height. He's got his feet underneath him, so he's constantly always in control of his body and getting through the other side of that collision. And then, I don't know how you tackle him. He is the best. He's got the best feet in the game. It's the feet, it's the pace. When he changes direction, he remains at that pace.
And the vision, Brynner. He's ahead of the game. Like, he saw the kick coming, he saw the defender coming, and he was almost stepping as he caught the ball. Like, it was amazing. It was like he was in the Matrix.
He's got a really good neck and feel. I've been able to score tries. I've been able to beat people. Look, it's impressive. And I think, obviously with Allende as well, man, his distribution skill has been awesome the last 24 months. It's pretty hard when he put away Colby, you look at the tight window where it was for that pass as well, to get that ball away for him to score that try. I know we're touching on Colby, but I'm going back to Allende. Look, I think he is arguably he's probably the best midfielder in the world, whether it be 12 or 13. I know he's a 12, but I reckon he's the best midfielder in the world, and he should be a nomination for World Player of the Year.
He's a freak. Like, he just is so consistent, but consistently great. And sometimes you don't know how good he is. Like, that one moment sort of shows, but he's taken a million carries like that this season, that when South Africa are under pressure, he makes a big play. And it's almost like he's like their unsung hero. I just don't think he gets as much love as maybe a Netzebeth or a Detroit or a Colby or even like a Labok or these young sort of players coming through. He is just a solid performer, but I don't want to do him a disservice by perceiving solid as just doing your job. Like, he is X factor and then some, but his brute force game and going through teams, both sides of the ball it's been pretty impressive. And a lot of those breakdown turnovers against the All Blacks at Ellis Park he was either the chop tackler that allowed the access, or he was the one winning the penalty. So he just does have the complete game.
So, maybe for next week, send us through your top 5 players or your finalists for this year's International Player of the Year. And if Damian Allende is on that as well, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Maybe as well, let's get into the hot steppers next week. Who are your top 3 steppers in the world? What have you got?
I reckon Mark Talia would be there. Like, when he's that hot feet and you just can't tackle him. Another guy, I'm probably haven't seen him play for a while, but Bryn will attest to this. Richie Mo'unga is, he's got very good feet and can have that explosion off the mark. Tom Wright's looking pretty good too.
Tom Wright is looking very good.
He had a very good, that first try where he whacked in. He's definitely found his mojo under Joe Schmidt, hasn't he?
Yeah. Well, they've found their mojo as a collective. They really are looking good. 94 points in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we spoke about that balance of attack earlier in the year against the All Blacks and maybe playing too much rugby. I just do feel they have a couple of licks and they'll put, contest the ball up or, put the ball long. So I do feel like they're not overplaying but making such strong decisions. And I think they've got Lolosio and Ikitau humming and into their strength. Lolosio, again, he doesn't actually engage the line, but he's still flat, so he appears there, but he actually just keeps his feet still and he draws defenders out. And then a number of times against Wales, you saw him actually just hit the line. He came off a forward pod, he came out the back of a play, and I think when you see him looking to run, and he's not at Richie Mo'unga's level, but when he's active and engaged out the back of plays like that, he's engaged and he knows what, he's sort of taking control, but it looks like they've spread the load of it a little bit because he seems to be positioned perfectly and suited to him.
Yeah. Ikitau's got hot feet. That try.
That was just, I thought someone was there.
Yeah.
It looked like he was passing and then it was like, okay, no one's there. And then it was just in and out, done like a dinner.
Yeah.
Not one for the highlight reels for the Welsh team.
No, all too easy. Brenna, do you think the Aussies can win the Grand Slam? Do you think they can get through these next 2 weeks, including beating Ireland in the last weekend?
They've given themselves an opportunity. I think if you look probably the draw-wise, it's probably the best way to be able to start the Grand Slam tour. I think in terms of being able to get that victory over against England, I think is always a tough one. And it's always tough to play England. I think with where they are, they would have been seen that as a real big one, and they won that to beat Wales. So I think, look, they're really, really struggling. Let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. They're really struggling. It's probably the best time to get them. But what it has done, it's probably given that group a lot of confidence. When you have a few big wins, especially in England and Wales, away from home, the confidence that they would have been building with those results, it gives them a great opportunity to do it now. Because I think, to be honest, the expectation is probably not to beat Ireland from around the world, but if you're Joe Smith and in that group, they'll be licking their lips to be able to give themselves an opportunity with the confidence that they have brought in the last 2 Test matches. And yeah, I agree with Jip, the attacking ability that they're showing, the contestable games have been able to get that balance really right. They gained 9% of it, was 50% on the weekend, which again sets up everything in terms of that attacking ability. So they're in a really good place, but at the same time, that challenge in the next 2 Test matches, I think, will show where they're at. And I guess if they can get that result, it gives them a great opportunity to come in 2025. And hopefully, for Australia's sake, they can sign Joe Schmidt a bit longer than that next year with the British and Irish Lions in that World Cup cycle.
They have to do the defensive performance they did against Wales, though, if they're going to beat either Scotland or Ireland. They're potentially more suited or positioned better with Joe Schmidt to maybe challenge Ireland. I think this week against Scotland is going to be a bigger test than some may feel. And I think if they just think this is a stepping stone to Ireland, they may be sharp. I thought Scotland was really strong against South Africa, and I think that they are a force to be reckoned with. And if Australia's defence isn't up to it, yes, Scotland let a lot of opportunities go. I don't think you'd see those same mistakes again. I think they'll make hay while the sun shines if Australia let them, but a couple of intercept tries against Wales, they really put some defensive pressure, some breakdown pressure on. It's probably the first time I've seen them do that this year, so they may be finding their legs in their defensive system finally.
Yeah, right. So, this weekend, Brenna, do you feel that is going to be the case?
I really rate Scotland. I think they've been unlucky against the big teams. We've touched on a lot probably the last 2 years. They've had some good continuity, a lot of players that have played a lot of rugby, and I think they play a brand of footy which is really good when they get it right on their day. So the breakdown will always be massive, and especially with Scotland, whenever they get that right and they get that good go-forward ball and Russell's playing on top of teams, it's very, very difficult. But if Australia can defend like they did against the Welsh, operating at 90-odd%, then they definitely do have a chance. But I will pick Scotland in a tight Test match in Murrayfield.
Mate, we're going to have to love you and leave you. We'll see you next week, mate.
See you, boys.
What you have now is a new guest coming into the studio, someone we haven't had on the show before. Spent a lot of time in Italy, 9 years, I think, in Italy. Dean Budd, 29 caps, 3 as captain for Italy, knows plenty about rugby over there, so we bring him into the studio. Dean, welcome.
Thanks, it's good to be here tonight.
Did you do your own Wikipedia?
I think my brother did a little bit of it.
Right, because it says there that you're known for your famous and fancy offloads.
Yeah, that's changed a few times every time that wiki, actually. As soon as we all worked out we could all add to each other. So I think you might find I still live in Treviso with my dog. Due, which is Italian for two.
For two?
Yeah.
All right.
Number one didn't last very long.
Fair enough. So what's life for you back home now like?
It's good now. I've kind of found my feet. I think it's been the best part of almost 4 years now, working with Bailey's on the commercial side of real estate. It's true. Everyone tells you about the transition out of rugby into the so-called real world. It was really challenging. I'd say probably year 3, I started to feel like New Zealand was home again for me, and could reconnect with friends early. But just to feel like that was a safe place and home, it was quite a difficult transition.
How's fatherhood treating you?
Challenging. I think that was all part of it. Peter Pan grew up pretty quickly, moving home, had to buy a house, got married and had kids all very quickly. So I can't say it was just the rugby transition, it was a whole life transition. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you're a bit of a culture shock as well as a change in career. It's quite a lot to take in, isn't it?
Moving back to New Zealand, like anything, I think you get used to your new norm. So I moved to Japan, and you kind of got used to that for a while, and then moved to Italy, and then that became my new normal. I remember my first challenge was the banks shut between like 1 and 3 every day, and it just was the most absurd thing for me to wrap my head around. We still got paid in checks, so I never got. I was
paid in checks?
Yeah, I was stacking up checks because I could never make it to the bank on time, and then I came home and I could go to the bank one time in the middle of the day. I was like, wow.
This is outstanding.
Yeah, look at the world we live in, and why is the bank open now?
That's amazing. So you arrived there, what, 2010?
2011, I think it was. Yeah.
And they were still paying in checks.
Yeah, and it happened for some time thereafter too. I think it was maybe one of the ex-players took over as our director of sport and said that's enough. I think it cost €1 for them to do any electronic transfer, so they didn't want to do that. But checks were easier.
That is one of the most interesting things about Italy, isn't it? The bureaucracy.
Yes.
There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of crap to get through.
Yeah. New Zealand's got its fair chunk, but Italy tops it pretty comfortably. Everyone's there's a line, and you start and you stamp it, and I've got to stamp it, then he's got to stamp it, and everyone gets paid along the way. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
What other lifestyle factors were different when you obviously went over there from Japan?
Yeah, I think lunch. Like lunch here is just such a rush. You smash your food down onto the next thing, and you would have seen it on movies everywhere. But it's a proper slow down. Here's 2.5, 3 hours. Jeez. Have a proper meal. Have a wine. Have a couple of wines. It's just, I think, that part of their life, just everything's slower, and you can really get used to that. It's quite a comfy place.
How did that factor into rugby training? Did they just work around it, basically? Oh,
like our words were, you're kind of pretty separated from that. You've got to do what you've got to do to fit things into the week. But an hour, what we would have had here would definitely be two over there, that's for sure.
So you weren't having a protein shake and a Prosecco at lunchtime?
No, we had daily fights with our nutritionist, but then we gave up because the food was nicer. I think our pre-match meal one time was a wheel of Parmesan cheese and some prosciutto, and we're just like, this is ridiculous, guys. Like, we've got to have something better than this. And the Italian dietitian was like, no, this is what you need. And then there's a big cake on the side. We're like, all right, then, we'll have the cake. He said it's the right thing to do.
Because it's the home of tiramisu as well, isn't it? So
yeah, we ate a lot. We ate a lot of desserts, drank a lot of prosecco. Got fat pretty quick.
I remember being there for the 2017 Test match that you played in, and there was a spread for the media, and there were 4 tables of pasta and booze. And we were drinking a beer before going into the box, and we were like, what on earth is this? At Eden Park, you're lucky to get a dry sandwich.
Yeah. No, the beauty of Italy, you can take your beer outside a bar, you can walk with it wherever you want. It's just the culture around drinking and eating is completely different to what we have. And
sounds outstanding. And
it's a damn good thing.
Yeah, and as far as the other elements, the language and those things, when you turn up and you're having to play over there, the majority of the people around you are Italian. I presume that training happens in Italian and you had to learn it quickly?
Almost. Yeah. It was kind of, when I arrived, our head coach was a South African,
All right.
We had an assistant who was South African. We had a Kiwi guy who was our backs coach. So we had a lot of South African guys when I first arrived, and I think every 2 months the coach would say he'd never speak another word in English, and we had to learn, but that went on for about 3 or 4 years of him saying that. And their boys, I'll throw Jaden Hayward under the bus really quickly. He spent probably the best part of 8 years there and probably couldn't order a beer in Italian.
How's yours?
It's all right. It struggles now. Yeah. Like, it's one of those things
You've got to be around it.
Yeah, I learnt by just being immersed in it all, and the moment I'm out of it, I went back for a wedding in July, and that was bad. We don't need to get into that. But once you warm up, it's all right.
Are you thinking in Italian on the field, if that's the case, or are you thinking in English and translating into Italian, or? Yeah,
I got to the point where I'd think in Italian. And it just happened in my world as well. You kind of hear things, and you skip that kind of little translation because you realise it doesn't always directly correlate across, and you find yourself actually speaking incorrectly if you do the direct translation. So, towards the end I would think in Italian. I'd come home and I'd then consciously have to think in English, which was a weird sort of process. Yeah.
Does Dued talk English?
Poor Due's not with us either.
What are you doing? Too much parmesan.
I don't want to get it. I'll have the SPCR after me if I go on too long about my track record. But sadly, the little fella's not with us anymore.
That's fair enough. What about the rugby culture? How much different was it as far as, the amount you train and the way that it works, the community in and around the clubs? Is it quite a big change from, let's say, your time in Northland or the Blues in Japan?
Incredibly different. So when I first arrived, it was more is more, and we just go to the death and everything. It's be on the field for 2 or 3 hours, whatever it takes, and we'll get it right, and then somehow we'll be fresh and ready to play tomorrow. And that's a massive disconnect. And it took them forever to understand that. Well, it took till Kieran Crowley arrived, quite frankly, for them to understand that. And you kind of would headbutt the wall a little bit, but after a while I just had to give up and say, this is what it is. I may as well be at least happy rather than fighting every point. So they're very old style, they're very passionate about everything. So Kieran coming in, and I think was 2015 or 16, brought a whole culture shift into what is actually professional rugby instead of the way they had always done it through their top 10 and historically what was just bash, more.
How do the Italian side or the people view like an All Black Test week? Because you'd imagine quite a passionate country, passionate rugby sort of team. How did you as an individual, as a Kiwi, control that, but that emotion through the week for the other teammates as well?
So All Black week, and I'm sure we'll touch on later, the respect for the All Blacks, we know it carries far and wide, and the Italians aren't any different. They've got so much respect. And I think it'll be a real detriment to them still on the weekend. Like, the players can't get over that mental barrier still, that they have so much respect for those guys out on the field that somehow they can go out there and beat them. They don't have that still. And to be quite frank, I started to lose that a little bit over time when I went there. I remember I represented New Zealand at age grade level, and I remember when we'd play England and under 19s or whatever it was, I'd be like, who are you guys? Like, you've never got a chance against us. We're the All Blacks, and we'd go out and we'd win. And we'd go out and we'd win, and we always delivered that. And so when I first got over there, I could carry that mentality with me, but after a while it starts to kind of
wear you down.
Yeah, you start to lose a little bit, and you're like, oh, Tuolangi is actually pretty good. which they are. They're incredible, don't get me wrong, but having that mental block of not actually respecting them, so much more beneficial to going out in the field and knowing you can win.
Yeah.
And is there change there? Is there a movement towards change? Is there a way that can be changed?
I think the rest of the world's done it. I think we've seen the aura around the All Blacks be lost a little bit. That will happen eventually with Italy. They've kind of getting the scalps in the Six Nations, which they hadn't won for a little while. That brings confidence, but no, I don't see that changing any time soon for the Italians at the moment.
How many players are there really? I mean, this is a football country.
Yeah.
Is there much depth there?
There's a lot of talent in Italy. I mean, it's a little bit like the Australian kind of theory of multiple sports and losing talent to them all. But the guys are naturally gifted. They're good. They're athletic, they're fast, they're fit. They're all the things that, man on man, if you're looking at them on piece of paper, you're saying, well, seems like a good rugby player.
Yeah.
So there is the talent there. I think it's just that psychological barrier where New Zealand, I think, has put a lot of work into. I think when I was in New Zealand, we had David Hatfield, I think it was, mental skills coaches, all of those things, and they've just got more and more. We still don't have that with Italy. We don't, they may have had one last year, but it's such a new and unknown thing to them. To be able to work on your mind and your skills within that, it's more just like, let's get in the gym and do some more reps. That'll make me better.
Yeah, 2 to 3 hours on the training bench.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It sounds similar to what Bryn talks about in Japan, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And a lot of players that go to Japan face the same thing. You sort of give up trying to fight against it, and you just got to embrace it because it isn't changing. But you look at sports around the world, and I always sort of reference American sports, but LeBron James meditating on the sideline of the court, like that mental aspect of professional sport is what takes you from good to great. And I think, obviously in time, no doubt they'll have to move to that, because if they can't believe when they step out onto the field, I mean, if you can't back yourself, I can't imagine too many others are going to back you.
So when you look at, let's say, a guy like Sergio Parisse, who really stood out in Italian rugby for a long period of time, did he have a slightly different mental approach? Was he set up differently mentally? Yeah,
he's one of those guys that I think had got out and played in Anglo-Saxon countries in France and experienced different cultures. He's the ultimate professional, and you see it in the touch on LeBron. You see all of those guys that always do the extras. At 40 years old, or it must have been close to that when we played together, he would ice. He would stay 30 minutes after every session. He'd be the first one to every session. He just never relented on his process, and it's pretty clear to be that's why he was so good. He just had his process, stuck to it, and God, he was good.
What we saw from Italy against Argentina, which is probably the best mark for us to maybe tell where they're at, because what we've seen from Argentina against South Africa and New Zealand and against Ireland, they're a very strong team. Defensively, there are some issues there from what we could see from 18 clean breaks from Argentina, 13 defenders beaten in the last quarter against Italy. There's when they get towards the end of the game, it's hard to stay in. Yeah,
I often have this fight with fans around fitness, and everyone says, "Oh, you guys aren't fit," and you're like, "Well, if you again put me on paper against a Lucy, or I claim to be a Lucy, a lock against the All Blacks, I'd probably run the same beat. I'd probably do the same bench press. I'd probably do the same squat." It's not that there's a fitness issue, but it's just, and it happens in those last 50 minutes. It's surmounted pressure that obviously you're pooped because you've just had to tackle all game, and there's a certain point where that has to give up. And so the attacking teams like RG's, they were dominating, they were carrying the ball, they're not spending as much energy on defence, so that's why I think they get a little bit exposed in those. They're not carrying the ball, they're not holding possession, which is probably where they can make their defence better, ironically, by attacking.
And you think about, like, if you look at last two sort of games, they've had a lot of ball, but they're almost that balance of attack. They don't really use, I suppose, attacking, kicking strategy. It's always tactical. When you look at, especially with this new law around the blocking and not having the ability to block, actually challenging in the air, because when as you've said about the wins they had in the Six Nations, broken play and unstructured, they're actually pretty good. Like, they can just play with that instinct and fear, and I think if they can draw themselves into that part of the game, they at least give themselves a chance to compete.
Now, one of the great things for Italy this weekend is Kapowotso is likely to be back from an HIA, which is huge. You've obviously seen that guy come up through.
Freak.
Yeah,
absolute freak. Didn't have the ability, unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to play with him, but the guys just have such huge respect for him. He's phenomenal, and just there was a guy, Minozzi, before him, who was of similar, probably 4 foot tall and 60 kilos, but incredible. Just incredible. Can find holes, can step, can turn on a dime.
And you have to feel that a player like him, spoken about it last few weeks about having certain players in the shed, maybe does give that belief. I'm not too sure if it'll convince them to have that resolve against the All Blacks, but he is a game changer, a match winner. And then you've got Monte Ioane, who is, if you can get him time and space, he's another electric. So this counter-attack theory, maybe quick throwing, is something they could lean into.
They're just X-factor games, those guys, and they can bring you out of any hole. A line break where you think you've got nothing to offer, and those guys are running 30, 40 metres down the line, and all of a sudden, here we go. Game breakers, absolutely.
It's an interesting place to be for them, I suppose, after all this time in the Six Nations and after all of the development. It's got to happen. So.
Yeah, and a big struggle for Italy consistently getting better is the federation.
Yeah.
So they operate off almost a political system that changes every 3 years.
Right.
And that's a voting system that's voted from the clubs. Won't delve too far into it, but as each president changes, funding changes into different areas of the game, things get taken away, things get added, and they've just got a new president in who everyone has full credit and will bring good change and will start to prioritise the top team as well, and give that additional support that they probably need.
Right, and then you go through an election period. So,
that's wild.
It must be extremely unsettling and inconsistent.
I don't want to make any comments, but there's apparently envelopes going everywhere. And you vote for me here, I'll make sure you get that in a year's time. And I've not seen any of it as such, but those are the rumours that go around. So I think that's a big part of it. The game in Italy is driven from the top, and the top's really inconsistent and can just be passion projects for kind of presidents as such. So eventually, this guy that's got in there for the next tenure will bring good change, I believe.
Yeah, and hopefully another tenure after that.
Yeah, that's.
Can they get re-elected?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I think they can do two. It's almost like a president. It's a wild
2
thing.
terms.
Yeah.
6 years. Get it done, or you're on your way out.
Yeah. We were going to strike leading into the 2019 World Cup, which I think Italy almost strike every 4 years, because we don't have a collective agreement. We barely have a players' association over there. So we spend a lot of our World Cup prep fighting with the federation to try and establish our payment protocol to go forward. No, and we kind of got to a point and moved on, and then we won our first 2 games. I think it was Canada and Namibia, and we in South Africa, and the president comes in and is like, and we literally had fought. We're going to strike. I'll double all your incentives if you guys win. And we're just like, man, you've cost us a month of our lives and stress leading into this World Cup, and all of a sudden on a whim you've found hundreds of thousands of euros to make everyone feel happy and play. You're like, oh, nah.
Yeah, it was based off your runaway try against Canada.
Yeah, I don't think
he saw that. He was inspired to throw more money there. That was a good 30 or 40 metres, wasn't it?
Yeah, at least.
It's increased now
as well.
Yeah. So this weekend, if you're going to make your pick as to how this is going to play out, what are you expecting?
I think it'll sit around that RG score. I don't want to come on here and kind of give false hope. I'm not going to say Italy's going to go out there and win it, but I think we were the victims of the All Blacks losing to England one year, and we had them the week after, and they absolutely hosed us. So I think I'm hopeful there'll be a couple of tries for Italy, and call it 55-10.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dean. You've got something for him, do you?
I do. I do want to preface it by obviously recognising Peter Thompson and what he does for Auckland sport in general, but just in case JP wanted something else to wear, there's a beautiful Bailey's polo.
I'm happy for you to keep it, mate. There's plenty of skin in the game for both of us, mate. I tell you, 2 great organisations.
If you're overseas, that's 2 real estate organisations going head to head on ARP. Thank you again, Dean. Thanks to Jipper, and thank you for tuning in as ever. Next week is our last show of the year. We'd love your contributions once again at Aoteroa Rugby Pod at sky.co.nz. So please, for next week, we're going to do an awards show. Send in us your ideas for awards. You know, it could be Tackle of the Year or Try of the Year or Player of the Year. It could be something as silly as the best escort line to prevent a fullback being taken out. Also, who you think would win it, 2nd, 3rd. And the winner will get on the show with their idea and also get sent out a nice Eden Park pack, a little bit of merch for you to celebrate the end of the season. So thank you very much once again for contributing to the show. Thank you to everybody who helps put the show together behind the scenes, and we'll see you next week. Mā te wā.